to all the exhausted village. That's what I'm gonna call your fans, Kyle. The exhausted village. Shout out to the exhausted educators.
This is a Holding On to Learning LLC production. Woo!
The ideas expressed on this show are not the views of their employer. Besides, if you really want to take advice from this guy, well, you should probably do it at your own risk.
You're gonna love the exhausted educators.
Class is in session. Here's the short bald dude from the Exhausted Educator Show.
What is going on, education heroes and fellow parents? That's right. One more time, we're doing a dual cast where we bring in the audience of the Exhausted Educator Show, where we're trying to help you recharge your educational battery, and the audience from our Parents Recharge Show, where we're trying to provide content for parents to support the kids in their lives. We're bringing you together for one episode. It's all about bringing families and communities into our schools. And the guest is amazing. She's my wife. I'm a little bit biased, I get it, but I think she's amazing. She's got really great stuff that she's going to share with you about getting families involved, getting communities involved, and bringing them into our school systems for the benefit of kids. It's actually something we are both really, really passionate about. She's also going to talk to you a little bit about the work she does as a coordinator of a nonprofit organization that works to bring in volunteers into early childhood centers to read aloud to kids on an individual basis. I think you're really going to enjoy listening to her, and you're going to probably enjoy listening to the ideas that she has and maybe a little bit of banter back and forth between her and I. Ladies and gentlemen, hang on tight. Here she comes, Nicole Hill. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a special episode because for the first time ever, you've heard me talk about her before, especially if you're part of you listen to our Parents Recharge show. But for the first time ever, the captain of our ship, the coordinator of our chaos, and she is a coordinator for other things as well that we'll get into. But I'm really excited to introduce you to my wife, Nicole Hill. Thank you for jumping on with us tonight, Nicole.
Oh, thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
So it's been an interesting couple months, especially the interesting few weeks, at least I should say. And we'll dive into more about that in a second. But part of the reason why you're on here is to talk about what you're doing currently. But before that, you had many years just taking your own journey up to what you're doing now, working for a nonprofit. You want to just give everybody your journey, your career journey. You can even go back further if you wanted to. You could share about the days, riding horses as a young girl on the whatever. But you just,
no,
how'd you get?
I won't go back quite that far. No.
You just want to catch everybody up to, what you've done up to this point to get to where you're at.
Sure. So we came to Dover thanks to the United States Air Force. My dad was transferred here. We actually were coming from Oklahoma. And this is where I started school. I was right here in the Dover, Camden area. So I am a graduate of Cesar Rodney High School. And from there, I went on to a small school in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. It's called Delaware Valley University now. It was Delaware Valley College when I was there, where I received a degree in agronomy and environmental science. I went on to Wesley College right here in Dover and got a master's in environmental science. And my career led me to lots of different places. I worked as a store manager for a company called Southern States. And then I started working as an environmental scientist with the state of Delaware Department of Natural Resources. And I continued to work there on and off for the next 15 or so years. I say on and off because we had 3 children in that period of time. So I did stop working for a short period of time after our twins were born. And then, like so many others, after the 2020 pandemic, I really started to wonder if this was really where I wanted to be for the rest of my career, and took a huge leap of faith and quit my job with the state of Delaware and became the Kent County coordinator for a nonprofit called Read Aloud Delaware. And that's where I am now and loving every minute of it.
It certainly was a leap of faith.
Yes.
We really hemmed and hawed about it because you went from a supervisor's role to a position where you're very passionate about what you do, but obviously wasn't going to be as easy on our bank accounts. but it was a good decision all around. And I think you would say that too. I know you
Yeah.
would say that. So
Absolutely.
I want to give you just a couple minutes to share the amazing things that you do as your coordinator of Read Aloud. Explain what the program is, and honestly, that kind of leads us into where we're going to talk and what we're going to talk about with families and community, getting involved with the school. So you just want to just kind of lay out for everybody what your program is that you work on.
Sure. So Read Aloud Delaware is a very unique nonprofit. We have volunteers that go out to preschools, daycares, elementary schools, and they read one-on-one to preschool age children. We are the only nonprofit that does that type of outreach. We are very focused on the preschool age because that is one of the most important ages where their little brains are just soaking up everything. And we know the power of reading aloud and sharing stories helps them to be more successful in school. So really important work that we're doing. We have volunteers that range in age from high schoolers, teenagers, to people who have full-time day jobs and their jobs allow them to do some volunteer work during the day, all the way up to retirees who are just looking for a way to stay involved, or maybe they are retired teachers and they miss being in the classroom a little bit. So we give them that opportunity to connect with some of our littlest learners. It's an amazing program. It's a great way for our community to bond and get together. We're taking, people who just want to give a little extra to their community, and they're giving to our littlest readers and helping them get a great start in school.
Yeah, it's an awesome program. It's an awesome program. And obviously our family's fully invested. Your mom is one of your volunteers at one of our schools in our local school district. And there's just opportunities to get out and make a positive impact on young kids. It's good stuff. And that's kind of where I want to go next, as far as like getting into the schools. And that's why I brought you on. But just for our listeners outside of our local area, which is the vast majority of our listeners, because the people locally hear me enough, they don't want to hear me much anymore. But just in case there's some that jumped on to listen to Nicole, it's an interesting process going into trying to become a school board member, which you and I have learned in the last few weeks. There's a lot more involved with that than we even figured out. But Nicole is going to she's a candidate for the school board, and we're putting our best foot forward, and she's putting out all kinds of content about her platform on what she thinks would be positive for our local school district. So one of the things you talk about, and we both believe strongly about, is the idea of getting families and communities into our schools to help. You just want to talk a little bit about that, the idea of how powerful that can be and why that's important?
Sure. I see it every day through my work with Read Aloud Delaware, the importance of bringing community members into schools. It gives kids other interactions outside of their family and their teachers. It also gives them a different perspective. We have people from all walks of life that are our volunteers at Read Aloud Delaware. So it's just a nice way for the community to really get together and do something great. Personally, we've experienced this. We have always been very involved in our children's education. That's just a decision that we made right from the start. We've always had a really good working relationship, communication with our kids' teachers. I have helped in many classrooms whenever the time allowed. When I wasn't working full time, I was definitely in the classrooms a lot more. And then we've always just volunteered to help wherever they needed help. But it became really, really important for us to have that community and that communication with those teachers after our son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I'm so glad that we had that foundation set. It was not an easy transition by any stretch, but because we already were involved and had that communication set up with teachers, it made that transition a little bit smoother. But we had to talk to everybody after he was diagnosed. We had to talk to the cafeteria workers. We had to have really good communication with the nurse, with his classroom teachers, the front office, basically anybody that could come in contact with him if he was having some type of medical emergency from his type 1 diabetes needed to know who he was, who we were, and how to get to us. So I'm really glad, looking back in hindsight, that we took the effort to have that great communication foundation set up. Who knew that we would need that, just a few years into him starting school. So that's why outside of medical issues, it's still really, in my mind, it's still really important for families to have a good foundation of communication with at least the teacher that their child has. Even better if you've established something, with the rest of the people that your kid comes in contact every day. But yeah, we definitely learned how important it is to know who's caring for your kid all day when you're not there. Really important.
Absolutely. We've been very fortunate for the schools that our kids have gone to have been very compassionate and caring, and they just take care of not just our kids, but everybody's kids. And way back when our son was diagnosed, that was for any listeners who are not part of the Parents Recharge podcast crew that listens to that podcast. I've shared with them before, like the trials and tribulations. It's not an easy transition for any family to go through, but we were very fortunate to have amazing people look after our son as we were going through that. And then as our other kids came along, our twins came along, and they have their own unique needs. We have other people in our school systems who've been we've just been very fortunate to have so many caring people help them. One of the other things that you and I are both really passionate about is the idea of mentoring. And looking back, way back, you and I were just talking the other day about how, when our son was diagnosed, you were actually mentoring a kid, a fifth grader at the time, in one of the schools, right? And
in his
part
school.
of that, yes, part of that process. You want to talk about, like, as being a parent, mentoring, and what that meant to you, mentoring a student?
Yeah, sure. That was a really unique experience. I decided that I had a little extra time and wanted to give back in another way. And the school that our son attended had a mentor program. So I said, sure, I'll mentor. And I was paired up with a young girl. She was in the fifth grade, and she had a lot going on. That was a really heavy lift. And I remember asking the paraprofessional that was in charge of the mentor program, are you sure I'm the right person for this? Because I'm not sure about this. And she's like, yep, you're perfect. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I can do this. And she's like, nope, you're the one. You guys are meant for each other. And she was right. There were some days that were hard, where she broke down and cried because of what was going on. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But I didn't realize until the end of the year, like you mentioned, I was actually supposed to meet with her to mentor the day that our son was diagnosed with diabetes. And I had to choke back tears while I gave her Christmas present, and let her know that I couldn't do our regular session that day because I had to take my son to the doctor. But at the end of that year, I think I'm not sure who got more out of that mentor program, if it was her or if it was me. Maybe it was a tie. I'm not sure, but it was just a really overall, good time meeting with her. I think we both grew in different ways. And I have a special Christmas ornament. We each made one, and ours hangs on our tree every Christmas. And it's just a nice time to reflect and think back about her and the young woman that she is now. So
it's pretty neat. And for anybody who's not been involved with any kind of mentoring program, if you're a family member or you're in the community, it's not just for the kids. You get something from it too. You really do. We just rolled out in January a mentoring program at one of our schools, and I've heard multiple adults have shared with me, like, it's the best part of their week, just going in, hanging out with a kid, maybe playing some board games, having some discussions. And in the end, you get a child or a teenager who just needs more good quality people in their lives. And it's highly effective and it's highly potent. And you may not feel like you are conquering the world with this kid, but you are one more piece of that village that they need in their lives. And I just think it's powerful stuff. You and I are very passionate about it, obviously, for many, many reasons. So our son was diagnosed, and then that led to some new things in our lives, meaning like all of a sudden we had an 8-year-old and he needed a 504 plan. And for any listeners who are regular listeners, you're well aware that I've worked in developing plans for kids and special education for a long time. However, my amazing wife, was not in her wheelhouse stepping into those formalized meetings. And if you remember, if you've ever heard me on any podcast that I go on, I talk about this often as one of the key things that I think we need to do in school systems is improve our communication with families as they're coming into those formalized meetings. Do you remember those days, those early days? You want to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah. That first one was a doozy. I don't think anything could have prepared me for that. It's hard enough to go through what we were going through. A diagnosis of type 1 diabetes is just life altering for everybody, for the whole family. And now we have to switch gears and we have to think of every possible thing that could go wrong, and we need to write a plan for him. And he was a little behind academically because we didn't know how sick he was for a while. So he needed some extra supports to get back on track. But that first meeting, I don't even think anything you could have said to me would have prepared me for. It's a gut punch. It really is. You're sitting with people that in our case, we knew. So I think for a lot of other families, they don't even know all these people that are around the table. But yeah, and there's phrases being thrown out and acronyms that you don't know what they mean. And in the back of your mind, the whole time, you're just thinking like, oh my gosh, this is where we are. And these people are talking about my kid because something's wrong. And I think that's the hardest part. And still, like you said, he was 8 when he was diagnosed. He's 15 now. It's still hard to go into those meetings. And now he joins us because he's part of his action plan. But it's still hard. It's still hard to sit there and have somebody tell you something's wrong with your child, and all the extra things we need to do at school to help them. So yeah, that one was really tough. You probably remember, I think we left and I cried a lot because I was confused. I was scared, and I didn't know what to expect going forward, but it has gotten a lot better. And I have learned a lot from those meetings to speak up and to advocate not only for our son, but for us as well. If I don't understand something now, I ask. I know now I can ask those questions like, hey, you're going too fast, or why do we even need that? Explain this to me. And what does that acronym stand for that you keep saying over and over? So yeah, if I were to give one piece of advice to a family that's going through the 504 or the IEP process, it would be, I know it's hard. It's really hard not to sit there and want to cry some days, but definitely speak up and say, I don't understand. I need you to explain this to me. So I think that also sets a good tone for your kid if they're in the room, because we are always telling our kids to advocate for themselves. So I really had to be the grown-up in the room and advocate for myself too, so that I understood what was going on.
And it's a good message for any of our educators out there to remind yourself going into those meetings that this is hard stuff for families to come into. This is hard stuff to be able to sit at a table. I had a guy tell me once, and I've shared with this a lot of people, it's like 10 people in an IEP meeting, and he said to me, this is like a congressional hearing. He was right. He was right. Luckily, like us, we knew people, and you knew some of the people around the table, but it was still difficult, right? And I remember having that conversation with you afterwards, and I said, well, it's kind of tough. What do you think? And you're like, that was really hard. It was really hard. And then in education land, we get caught up in throwing all these educational terms around. I'm going to take the LRE and we're going to do the IEP and send it to the 504. And in the meantime, people who don't have that experience, their head is spinning, and it's really challenging for families. It's really challenging for parents. So as educators, please keep that in mind. The other thing I'm going to throw out before we move on, if you're involved with IEPs or 504 plans, please take some time to share the positive things about every single child. They've all got them. I can't tell you how important that is, because if all you're doing is sitting around a table and talking about the things that need to improve in a kid, you're sending a message like they don't have any strengths, and that's not the message you want to send. So,
And as a parent, if that isn't being said, then ask,
yes.
Where has my child advanced and since our last meeting, or what is one positive thing you can share about my child? Even if they get to class on time, great.
Yep.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
But share something positive. It does go a long way, and it does do a lot, I think, to calm the nervousness of that meeting. So,
yeah. Agreed. Well, there's a lot to learn there from both sides of the table. So the thing from the family side is that is exactly what Nicole was saying. Like, listen, your child, if you have young children, you're their advocate. As they get older, we're trying to teach them to advocate for themselves. But that's the whole process. So depending on when your child is diagnosed, or when your child comes into the option of maybe they've gone through a tiered system, and now all of a sudden you're looking at maybe there's special education services, or maybe we're jumping into a 504, whatever it is. Just remember, you're entitled to ask questions. You should. And it's hard when there's a lot of people you don't know sitting around a table and staring at you, or saying things that you probably don't understand. But just keep in mind, you are entitled to advocate for your kids. It's a very important part of the process. When we talk about IEPs or 504 teams, you're an important part of that team. As your child gets older, they are an important part of that team, probably the most important part of that team as well. So that's really good information from both sides of the table. Now, you're getting ready to, well, you're not getting ready. We're working on a campaign for the school board. In later on, in beginning of May, there's going to be a vote for the school board. Do you have anything before we jump off that you just want to share? Anybody maybe locally about what you're all about as far as a candidate for our local school district?
Sure. One of the main reasons I decided to run for school board was because I do believe in the power of community within our schools and family involvement within our schools. A lot of things happen in that school building that need to be shown to the community and the families, and vice versa. I think the community and the families can share a lot with what's happening inside those buildings too. We just need the whole package. And I think the pandemic kind of made that kind of break down a little bit. And I think schools are really trying to get back there. So I just feel like, I offer a voice that just really wants to propel that forward, even better than it used to be before the pandemic. So it's a definite passion of mine. After I've been immersed in the nonprofit realm for the last 2 years, and just seeing the power of community on our earliest learners. I'm just, excited to hopefully take this next step and bring that into our local school district as well.
And if somebody wants to maybe reach out to you and find out more information, or contact you, or just find out information in general, where should they go?
So I have a Facebook page, an Instagram, and a website. So maybe we can share that information with your viewers.
We will put all that information, as always, down in the show notes. So check it out there. If you're on YouTube, it'll be in the show notes. If you're an audio pod, same deal. And as you always know, you can always hook up with me at Recharged Family, and that all that information will be below as well. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been an interesting episode. It's the first time I've ever done a podcast with someone else in the same house. If we would have had, multiple mics, we probably could have sat at the same table. However, my wife is sitting right above me in her dining room, and I'm in the basement, so that's been interesting. But to be honest with you, the idea of family, communities, helping schools is something we are both extremely passionate about. I honestly believe this. I've said this so many times. I say it till I'm blue in the face. We can't, in education, we can't make this lift alone. There's too many challenges. We need the families, and the families are going to be more successful with their kids at home if they have the school on board. Somebody said to me recently, this was involving like behavior support, and they said, you know what, the best thing is if we're doing the same thing and we're communicating with the home and they're doing the same thing at home too. That's the kind of thing we need going in education to make the lift, whether it be instructional support, whether it be behavioral support, anything, social, emotional, mental health, all of it. We just need to help each other, and it's for the benefit of kids. That's what it's all about. So
Absolutely.
Thank you, Hun, for your time. Appreciate you. And thank you to all your viewers if you're local. Again, I'll have all the information for Nicole in the show notes, so you can find out more information about her platform and how you can connect with her. For everybody else, every other Thursday. Hope to see you or hear you again soon. Have a great one.
Party time.
It's like, boo, boo, boo. Sirens are going off in my head. We're going to try to just not be horrible.
I'm watching you, exhausting educators. Always watching. Class is dismissed.